I'm here to help you to fall in love with the potential of dialogue. I myself started a pretty intense love relationship with this method. And the more I get to know this particular method's qualities and its endless mysteries, I think I found a soulmate for life. So, dialogue, what is it? I hear dialogue being mentioned as a solution to our experience of growing polarization. I hear it being mentioned as a solution to our social, environmental, and political challenges. And I hear the call for dialogue often being defined not by what it is, but what it is in opposition to. So let's say there is a political challenge that gets stuck. It doesn't take long before you hear someone calling for dialogue to be the solution of that. And people around will be nodding, yes, yes, dialogue. This is what we need. This is what we want. But do we really know what we mean when we say we want dialogue? Is it clear what the difference is between a conversation in a group and dialogue? I don't think it is. But what is clear to me is that there's something in this word dialogue that my heart is really longing for. And I think it is a longing that we share. It is kind of this hope that somehow it's possible to bring more beauty and more understanding into our relationships and into the world. And what's also clear to me is that the people around me are ready. Because in the last 2 years, I did a lot of work with dialogue. And I met so many people who really feel a big desire in them to create new kinds of conversations about really difficult topics. I've heard these people say, I would love to bring this or that or this person together and have a dialogue about death or about living more sustainably together or about the future of democracy or about being a man or a woman in the company where I work. I would love to create this, but there are doubts. So my intention with standing up here, down here, is to convince you that creating a powerful dialogue is something that you can initiate, something that you can be part of, and something you should go out and practice much more. That it is in our hands to transform the conversations we're currently having into the dialogues we need and that we want to have. And this is why I want to share 3 principles with you that I think makes that difference. And if some of you will leave this room tonight feeling, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make dialogue, my heart will sing. And I will also be very happy to help you with that. So, these 3 principles are 3 simple words, but in this simplicity lies the quality. The principles are the results of a long learning journey. Over the last 2 years, and this is over the last 2 years, together with Collaboratio Helvetica, I and my good friend Christine and many others, we've had the amazing opportunity to really go out and explore what dialogue is and what role it plays in social change. So let's go into it. The first principle is that to have a dialogue, you need to make it somewhat personal. Why is that? You might wonder. Well, I invite you to think about the last time you were part of a conversation you feel was a dialogue. Just remember back, and my question to you is, did it in some way feel personal? Or maybe you think about the dialogue you would love to have in the future. What's the topic? Who would the people be? And what's the potential of the conversation you could have? Maybe it's just me, but when you imagine this dialogue, doesn't it also immediately somehow turn personal? The suggestion I give is that instead of relying on the exchange of knowledge, which I think we are doing enough of already, don't you also think that? We should rely on exchanging our relationship and our attachment to that knowledge. That means sharing our personal experiences and feelings, because the experiences I've had in my life, where I was hurt, where I was touched, where I was attacked, or I was excited, that is what shapes the opinions and the beliefs I have about the world and about the topic of the dialogue I'm part of. So when we engage with these relationships and the attachments through sharing our personal experience, I actually enter this ground where I might be able to also shift my perspective on the topic. And when we experience dialogue together, we might enter this ground together, which means we might also be able to shift our collective perspective on the topic. And that's the power of the personal principle. So, very concretely, practically, how could this be done in a dialogue? So what I would do is, when the group is together, you want to start with raising a question that helps people get on the same page. Why are we even here together? So a question could be, how do we solve climate change in this time we live in? But then quite quickly you want to bring in a question that helps people turn around the camera away from the problem, the solutions, the reasons, all of that, onto themselves and their own personal experience with that topic. There could be a question like, when is the last time I felt separated from nature? And then you can be there for a bit, explore what this does to you, and then go back to the level of we and look at this topic again. And you will find that as a group you relate differently to the topic now than you did before. You might also find that you want to shift totally direction from where you were going or where you were. And this is where the second principle come in handy. Oh, yes. And that is simply that the conversation needs to stay open. Open and free to develop by itself, without specific, already placed ideas or desired outcomes attached to it, what it should be, what it should do, where it should go. It has to be open for it to be dialogue. And I thought it's a little bit like it is with children. If we don't let go of our wish and our desire for them to grow up and become A, Y, Z something, even we feel like it's really the best for them, and they would benefit so much from this direction we have in mind. They would still not be free to just become themselves, right? So, what to do if you are in a conversation and it starts to feel like it's attached or there is a direction and it's not open? Well, how I personally detect that this is happening is sometimes when I feel like I'm withdrawing from the conversation. The others are going somewhere and I haven't been able to follow. And what I've experienced helps me, and also what I experienced helps others, is when we find a way to connect to the present moment. And for this, I think it could be the right moment to try it out. So, what I would ask you is to turn to a person next to you. Find a partner, a neighbor, anyone. Doesn't matter if you know the person or not. And for a short minute, I want you to share with him or her, how am I experiencing the present moment right now? Meaning, what do I feel in my body? And what's my attention doing? What's it focused on? Just share for a minute that simple invitation. So I'm going to take back the attention again. And maybe you notice that what is real for you right now in this moment, it's something that cannot be planned on beforehand. So it's like being present with something that doesn't yet have a certain meaning or any direction necessarily. And that's exactly why, when we connect to it, it helps us to come back into this open space in the dialogue. But for that to really work, we need the third principle as well, which is called participation. And what it means is that everything that participates in the conversation, in the dialogue, needs to be embraced as it is. And for this, I thought I could share with you a little example. Actually, an example of an experience I've had that I think bridges very well the second and the third principle even. So some years ago, I was in a dialogue, and I felt we were doing great. We were moving in the right directions, things were lining up, we were going somewhere. The topic was developing, and I felt alignment, moving forward. And then a woman raises her voice, and she starts to share something about, in this present moment, she was feeling some sort of frustration in the atmosphere, which was so annoying to me. And in that moment, my inner control freak felt like freaking out. And I really wanted to just point at her and say, "Oh, what are you doing? You are ruining where we are going. It's getting somewhere. You don't get it." But when I embrace and remember the principle of everything to participate as it is, I will not judge this voice or this woman from speaking, as I will also not judge myself for being triggered. Because also my trigger is allowed to participate. Yes. Right? So instead of freaking out, or maybe being disappointed and then withdrawing myself and letting her take it somewhere new, I tried to share openly what I was experiencing. That I had this feeling the conversation that had a nice direction has been ruined, and this makes me feel triggered. And this is just an example of how more of reality can become allowed to participate in the conversation. When I look back at this example now, I also see that I was in fact kind of forcing a certain direction. I was forcing a direction onto the group that wasn't fully real. And what I have learned through a lot of dialogue work now is that when we force a direction or an outcome onto people, eventually reality will come back and kick us in the butt. And this is why being able to be in dialogue with reality is what matters. This is what we have to learn. So, with these simple yet powerful 3 principles of making the conversation personal, of keeping it open, and remembering to let everything that participates in the conversation be there just as it is, as part of reality, you can take conversations and turn them into powerful dialogues. And when you do that, I think you will also fall in love with it. It probably happens to you like it happened to myself. When I see a circle and members of a group having a dialogue with each other, it's the moment when I see how it could also be between the members of the world. And this is when dialogue brings me hope. Thank you very much for listening.